Is Santa Claus a time traveler? How can we keep track of Santa Claus on Christmas Eve? And how is Santa Claus thinking sustainably when he's delivering presents around the world on Christmas Eve? In this video, I'm going to answer those questions and more as we explore the secret science of Santa Claus. My name is Dr. Barry Fitzgerald, the superhero scientist, and I'm delighted to be here to present Is Santa Claus a Time Traveler? As part of Ballinasloe Library's Comic-Con. Well, I'm delighted to be part of this fantastic event and I hope you are ready to learn about some fascinating science behind the incredible journey that Santa Claus undertakes on Christmas Eve. I'm a scientist by training and I've written a number of popular science books, including Secret Science of Santa Claus, so I think I'm in the right position to present some of the incredible science and engineering feats that Santa Claus uses to take him around the world on Christmas Eve. So I hope you're ready to get into some of this incredible science, so let's get started. Right then, let's get things started with the secret science of Santa Claus, and the first question that we're going to consider is the following. Is Santa Claus a time traveler? Would he want to be a time traveler? Now we know that Santa Claus undertakes an incredible journey on Christmas Eve, and for Santa Claus, time is very much of the essence. It's a precious commodity for Santa Claus because he has to deliver millions of presents around the world in one night, and as we'll find out, he has a little bit more than 24 hours. I'll tell you about that later on. Now we must approach the idea of trying to figure out if Santa Claus is a time traveler by first answering one important question or presenting one important fact. In fact, and this is it. We are all time travelers. Congratulations. Welcome to the Time Traveling Club. You might be wondering, what do I mean when I say that we are all time travelers? Well, we are moving to the future at 1 second per second. Right, that might sound not overly exciting, but every single day we are doing that. We are taking our way to the future at 1 second per second. But I'm sure you're wondering, could we go faster than that? In other words, could we skip ahead a little bit and perhaps get to the future before everyone else does? Well, that's what I'm going to try and address here when I talk about Santa Claus and his time traveling feats. But to answer the question, we need to turn to some real physics. And to get that real physics, well, we need to turn to someone who knows a thing or two about some complicated mathematics and the physics of the universe that we live in. And that's this guy here, Albert Einstein. Now, according to Albert Einstein, he came up with some great theories at the start of the 20th century. And in short, in terms of time travel, according to his theories, his famous theories of relativity, the answer is yes. We can indeed travel to the future. Now, it's not a cheat. It's based on the real laws of the universe, the real physics that we interact with every single day. And according to Einstein's theories, it works as follows. Time slows for fast-moving objects. In other words, if you're moving, your clocks will go slower, and this will help you get to the future. You might be confused by this, so let's explore an example involving, you guessed it, Santa Claus. Well, here we are. Here we have Santa Claus at one of his workshops in the Arctic Circle, and he's getting ready to set out on Christmas Eve on his incredible journey around the world. Now, the way things go for Santa Claus is the following. His initial speed is 0. Well, that makes quite some sense because he has to start from rest before he starts moving. And of course, this is something we do every single day. Before we start moving, well, we must be at rest. But the question is, what is Santa Claus's average speed when he's traveling around the world if he was to simply just fly around the world really, really fast? Well, according to some research by some scientists, they estimate that Santa Claus is traveling at roughly 1 million meters per second. This is quite an extraordinary speed, and Santa Claus needs to travel at this speed in order to get around the world on Christmas Eve and deliver presents to millions and millions of expectant children. But how does this speed compare to some of the fastest things in the universe? Well, there's nothing faster in the universe than the speed of light, which is 300 million meters per second. And you can see here that, well, we're talking about millions of meters per second, just like the speed that Santa Claus apparently travels at on Christmas Eve. Now, this means that Santa Claus is traveling at a speed that is roughly 0.33% the speed of light. This is quite close, or quite a reasonable fraction, not close, but a reasonable amount or percentage of the speed of light. Now, according to Albert Einstein, when you're traveling at these type of speeds, things start to get a little bit unusual. That's because time starts to run slower for fast moving objects, and this can have repercussions for the whole idea. If you move faster, then time will start to slow down for you, and this might start lending itself towards the time travel aspect in relation to Santa's journey around the world. But before we take a closer look at that, we need to take another thing under consideration. Now, that other thing we need to take under consideration is the fact that Santa Claus takes roughly around 31 hours to get around the world. It's not 24 hours as you might expect. Now, the reason that it's 31 hours is because of the time zones that we have on planet Earth. This means that it's not the same time at every location at the same time. For example, if you're in Limerick, where I'm from, and the time is midday, so 12 o'clock in the middle of the day, it will be 1 o'clock in the afternoon in Berlin in Germany, but it will be 7 o'clock in the morning in New York in the United States. Now, these time zones are quite helpful to Santa Claus when he's traveling around the world, and he does take advantage of them. But I'm not going to dive into the time zone aspect here. I'm more interested in that number, that 31 hours, because that's a key number for the calculation I'm going to present in a moment. Right, so let's go back to that situation with Santa Claus and his traveling around the world at that, well, astronomical speed of 1 million meters per second. To explain the effect of moving at these really fast speeds on Santa Claus, let's consider the following example. Imagine that you and Santa Claus have identical clocks, and you're at home at rest, you're not moving, while Santa Claus takes the clock that he has and carries it on the sleigh as he travels around the world. Now, if you're at home and not moving, it means that you're at rest. On the other hand, though, Santa Claus is traveling at roughly around 1 million meters per second. After Santa Claus has completed his trip around the world, what you will find is the following. According to your clock, 31 hours will have passed since Santa Claus started and ended his journey. Now, in order to know this particular number, Santa Claus will have to have told you when he started and when he finished. So let's imagine that one of the elf scientists sends you an email indicating the exact moment when Santa Claus starts his journey, and then he sends you another email to tell you when Santa Claus has finished his journey. But if you were to look at the clock carried by Santa Claus as he traveled around the world, you would find that 31 hours have not passed on his clock, which might sound a little bit surprising. But this is where Albert Einstein and his theory of relativity comes into play. The reason that Santa Claus's clock is running slower is because he's been traveling at 1 million meters per second over the course of 31 hours. Now, that's the average speed he's been traveling at. It means that he could have been traveling faster than that sometimes, or he may actually have stopped because, of course, at some point during the journey, he has to deliver the presents, of course. But if you were to look very closely at his clock and compare it to your clock, the one that you took all those measurements on his time and you were able to start and stop it at the exact moment you received the emails from the elf scientists, you would find that Santa Claus's clock would have run a little bit slower. In fact, it would have been slower by 0.7 seconds. This indicates something quite extraordinary about Santa Claus's journey on Christmas Eve. What this very simple example represents is that if Santa Claus is traveling at 1,000,000 meters per second on Christmas Eve, over the course of what seems like 31 hours to you, Santa Claus will actually have skipped over 0.7 seconds of that 31 hours and gone to the future, from his perspective, that is. But you might be thinking, oh, it's only 0.7 seconds, that's not a lot. But for Santa Claus, that's quite a lot, because on Christmas Eve he has to deliver millions and millions of presents to a whole bunch of children around the world. He needs every single second, every single millisecond in order to achieve his goal. So if he's losing 0.7 seconds on Christmas Eve, in fact, this is actually a really bad idea. Because as I've mentioned, time is of the essence. It is precious to Santa Claus. He needs every single second in order to achieve his goal. And the world expects. There are so many children around the world who want their presents and want them to be there on Christmas morning. And Santa Claus has got to visit a lot of countries as he travels around the world. Now, of course, Santa Claus's sleigh is traveling quite quickly. But when you look at planet Earth, there's a lot of land there, but there's also a lot of water and a lot of oceans. In fact, the surface of planet Earth is around 71% water. And, there's not a lot of people living in the middle of the oceans. So maybe Santa Claus could figure out a way to skip over some of that space. And in fact, he has indeed, in order to speed things up even more and maybe even avoid losing that 0.7 seconds and gaining it all back, Santa Claus has a solution. And the solution, well, it's quite clever. So what he does is he realizes that he doesn't have to fly over the oceans or parts of the planet that are very sparsely inhabited or where there's actually nobody living. So what he can do is the following. He can skip over those parts of the planet. He doesn't have to fly over the entire Pacific Ocean, and he doesn't have to fly over all of the Atlantic Ocean. No. So what he can do is he can use his super fast sleigh to move around countries and cities where there are people, and then when he needs to skip over something, well, what he can do is he can just open up a portal, perhaps a wormhole, and just fly through that, and therefore skip over space and save himself some valuable time on Christmas Eve. So is Santa Claus a time traveler? Well, he might be, and it's probably true that he is, but he'll be doing his utmost not to be a time traveler, because if he is one, then he's losing precious time on Christmas Eve. And as we know, on Christmas Eve, for Santa Claus, time is of the essence. Santa Claus's journey is incredible. We know that he has to travel all around the world on Christmas Eve and deliver millions of presents. And he does it all in roughly around 31 hours, provided, of course, that he avoids traveling too fast. Otherwise, he'll lose time because he'll actually be time traveling. Instead, he can use those portals that I mentioned in order to skip over space on the planet that is sparsely inhabited or where nobody lives at all. Now, he's aided on his journey by the time zones. Those help him, and he really does take advantage of those on Christmas Eve. And 31 hours, though, it's a very, very long time for Santa Claus, and he's got to deliver millions of presents. He's got to be checking that list as he's flying all around the place, and it means that he's in the sky for a long time. You could imagine that that's quite tiring for Santa Claus, but in addition to that, he's got to make sure that he avoids anything else that's in the sky. That could be airplanes or space shuttles or anything else. And to help Santa Claus, well, we can help him. Not only do they have scientists help him, but we can help him out. And to do this, we should be able to track Santa Claus on his journey around the world in the very same way that air traffic controllers are able to track airplanes using particular systems known as radar, which I'll explain about later on, that you'll have at airports. And you might see images that look like this when you're tracking airplanes in the vicinity of an airport. That's what air traffic controllers see anyway. Now, thankfully though, we do have access to this technology in order to help us to track Santa Claus's progress on Christmas Eve. And a lot of this technology, well, it's available around the world, but there's one organization that's really focused on making sure that Santa Claus gets his job done in a safe and healthy manner. And that organization is the North American Aerospace Defense, also known as NORAD. Now, NORAD is an organization that is a collaboration between the United States of America and Canada, and their headquarters can be found in Colorado in the United States. And what NORAD have done is the following. They have put in place a system that tracks Santa Claus's progress on Christmas Eve as he flies around the world, and it's called NORAD Tracks Santa. And you can follow NORAD's tracking of Santa on Christmas Eve by going to the website www.noradsanta.org, and that is where you can track Santa's progress as he makes his way around the world with all those valuable presents. But the question is this: how does NORAD track objects, whether it's Santa Claus or whether it's something else? Well, NORAD has a number of technologies at its disposal, so let's take a close look at one of them. This is planet Earth. Now, I'm sure some of you already know that there are satellites in orbit around the Earth. Some of these satellites are used in mobile communications. Some of them are used to relay your favorite TV programs so you can watch them at home. And there are others that are used by organizations like NORAD to keep an eye on the planet and make sure that everything is okay. There is a bunch of satellites in orbit around the Earth, and they're part of a system that's called the Space-Based Infrared System. Now, there's a word in that title, infrared, and you might be wondering, what is infrared? Well, let me explain. The human eye is able to see visible light. That's the light that is reflected off objects, falls on our eyes, and then it actually creates electrical signals when it reaches the back of the eye, and those electrical signals travel down the optic nerve into our brain, and we're able to see. Now, we can see visible light, but there are lots of other types of light or radiation that can also be known as. One of those is infrared radiation. Now, infrared radiation is basically heat. So anything that is warm or hot will be giving off infrared radiation. So a light bulb not only gives off visible light, but it's also hot, so it has an emission of infrared radiation. A computer, when it's on and being used, will give off infrared radiation. Even a refrigerator, which is used to keep things cool, if you put your hand in around the back, please don't do this of course at home, but if you put your hand around the back of a fridge, well, you'll feel heat coming out of the back of the fridge. And the human body also gives off infrared radiation because we're warm. Unfortunately though, we can't see infrared radiation. Our eyes are not able to actually distinguish them or detect this type of radiation from visible light, or in fact, we can only see visible light, and there's a whole bunch of radiation types we just can't see. So right, we have these satellites in space that were put there by NORAD, but what exactly do they do? NORAD actually uses this system of infrared satellites to detect missiles. Yes, really, to detect missiles. You might be wondering why. Well, there's a good reason. The United States and Canada want to keep an eye on other parts of the planet to make sure that there are not any missiles that are launched that should not be launched, or that there's an accidental launch in relation to a missile or anything like that. But it's also designed to check on other things. For example, it can be searching for explosions somewhere on the planet. It can also be used to monitor forest fires that might be breaking out somewhere. And this of course can be very useful when it comes to protecting the habitat and of course saving people from the dangers of large-scale forest fires. And it can also even be used to keep track of plane crashes, so that if a plane suddenly goes down in some remote part of the planet, well, this satellite system might be able to pick up the crash itself, and hopefully then direct rescue crews towards the crash site. Now, NORAD keeps a database of heat signatures, and these heat signatures range from everything from missiles to forest fires, to plane crashes, to buildings going on fire, whatever. They keep a database of these, but there's also someone or something else also in that database that is connected to Santa Claus and his Christmas Eve journey. Before I reveal what is in NORAD's database and connected to Santa Claus and his Christmas Eve journey, let's take a closer look at how these satellites actually work. So here's planet Earth with a couple of those satellites that can detect these infrared signatures, and let's imagine that 2 missiles are launched from some part of the planet. Well, immediately then the infrared signature, which is given off by the heat coming from the back of the missile, that will be picked up and detected. Now, when Santa Claus is flying around the world, those satellites can keep track of Santa Claus by the following method. Now, it's not because he's burning anything on the sleigh. I'm going to talk about that in a few moments as well. It's not that they're tracking, or the heat from Santa Claus, because he's actually not giving off enough heat. In fact, the heat signature that they are tracking is coming from Rudolph's red nose. Yes, indeed, those satellites can detect the infrared signature that is given off by the heat from Rudolph's glowing red nose, and this is exactly what NORAD are watching and looking for on Christmas Eve. Now, NORAD uses a bunch of other technologies as well, such as radar, which I mentioned earlier on. Now, radar stands for radio detection and ranging, and it's used by airports to keep track of airplanes when they're flying nearby. But of course, the radar systems that NORAD have at their disposal and airports around the world will also be using their radar systems on Christmas Eve to keep track of Santa Claus. But the question that I haven't answered, and I'm going to answer right now, is why does NORAD track Santa Claus on Christmas Eve? Well, there's 3 very important reasons. First of all, they're thinking about protection. They want to protect Santa Claus from harm when he's flying around the world, and making sure that he doesn't fly into an airplane by accident or maybe end up in the middle of a forest fire. That's the first reason. Second of all, it's acting as a warning for Santa Claus, so that if there's anything wrong on Santa Claus's flight path, they will send this information to Santa Claus's sleigh directly, or to the elf scientists in the Arctic Circle, who can then relay that information to Santa Claus. So they're providing a warning system with immediate data at Santa Claus's disposal, so that if anything is going to go wrong, he gets that information as soon as possible. And finally, well, they can also use some of their systems to track the weather, and NORAD can relay this information to Santa Claus on the sleigh. So if he's about to encounter some very bad weather or a severe turn in the weather, he can get that information well in advance, so he can change his route slightly to deal with the incoming rain, thunderstorms, snowstorms, or whatever he has to deal with. Because when it comes to Christmas Eve and Santa Claus's journey around the world, it goes without saying that we all want him to get around the world safely, and NORAD also want him to get around the world safely, because NORAD has got Santa Claus's back on Christmas Eve. We are in the middle of an emergency. That emergency is the global climate change emergency. Because of our industrial activities over the last couple of 100 years, well, we have instigated the melting of the ice caps, the accelerated melting of the ice caps and icebergs. We have seen parts of the planet become dry and barren when they once were full of plants and animals and growth and lots of water. And we have polluted our planet in ways that are unimaginable, with plastics all over the planet and our oceans filled with millions of tons of waste. Now, Santa Claus knows this all too well, and he certainly has been taking notice and taking heed to these changes, and he has been thinking responsibly in relation to how he can contribute towards a sustainable planet. Before, though, I get on to how he's achieving it, I need to explain something very important to you. The difference between weather and climate. Now, weather, that is what we see on a daily basis. So when you get the weather report on a newspaper, or if you hear it on the radio, you're hearing about the weather conditions over a very short period of time, possibly over 1 or 2 days or even a week. But the climate is the long-term behavior in terms of weather patterns at a particular location on the planet. And this would be extended over a period that could be 10, 20, 30 years. What is the average weather conditions over that particular period? That's climate. Weather is over a small period of time, while climate is over the longer period of time. And what we have seen and what the science shows is that we are seeing wholesale climate change on this planet. That means that the long-term weather patterns at locations around the world have drastically changed from what they were in the past. Now, a major cause of climate change is, well, one thing that we have been relying on for the last couple of 100 years, and that is the use of fossil fuels. We have been burning these, and we've been pouring gaseous particles and other elements into the atmosphere that are contributing towards the changes that we see on this planet. Carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, and other gases that are being emitted from the processing of these materials. Now, Santa Claus is aware that time is of the essence, not only for his journey around the world, but also for our planet. And he is thinking proactively, and has been for a number of years, in terms of instigating and implementing new approaches to ensure that our planet stays the way that it is. And he's been thinking about these issues, not only with his scientists, but also with other scientists around the world. He's been thinking sustainably about what he needs to do and what he needs to achieve at his workshops. Now, in the past, of course, he would have probably processed some fossil fuels, and he would have been burning coal and burning wood to keep warm in winter. And that would have been something that he would have done in the past. And yes, there would have been emissions. But nowadays, and well, ahead of us in any case, Santa Claus has the technology in place to help reverse his own carbon footprint, and we can learn a thing or two from him. One thing that Santa Claus has been implementing for a number of years is carbon capture. The idea of grabbing back some of that carbon dioxide that he emitted through his burning of coal or wood or whatever in order to keep warm and also to run his workshops. And the idea is that you can grab that carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and take it and put it back into the ground, reversing what we had done when we burnt the fossil fuels, because we took them from the ground and we burned them and then produce CO2. Santa Claus will have done this, taking fuels from the ground and burning them, and we've been doing it. Well, we've been doing it a lot, actually, to be honest. But fortunately, we're playing catch up in regards to Santa Claus. And yes, the technology is now starting to be developed that can help us to achieve these goals that we need to achieve in relation to managing pollution. One of these technologies is this that's been implemented in Iceland. This is a carbon capture system that can capture the equivalent of 870 cars' emissions of CO2 per year. And it can capture that and put it under the ground. Now, we need more infrastructure like this. We need more things like this in order to achieve our climate goals. We need to decrease carbon dioxide and carbon monoxide in the atmosphere, and we need more of this. But back to Santa Claus. Does Santa Claus use fossil fuels on his sleigh when he's flying around the world? In other words, is he burning coal on the sleigh in order for the sleigh to fly? Well, the answer is no, he's not. But it does fly, of course, and it flies using something else. And it flies using magnets. You might be wondering, how does Santa Claus's sleigh fly using magnets? Well, here's a magnet with the North and the South Pole, and I'm sure that some of you have played with magnets in the past. If you bring two magnets close to each other and you have the same poles facing each other, they're going to repel each other. But if you bring two magnets close to each other and they are of opposite poles, well, they are going to attract each other. And this is something that Santa Claus has taken advantage of with regards to his journey around the world on Christmas Eve. And this is what he's done. He's taken his sleigh and the reindeer. In this case, we just have Rudolph for this example. I don't have all of them there for simplicity. And what he does, he has placed magnets along the bottom of the sleigh, on the runners of the sleigh, and also on the shoes that are worn by the reindeer. Now, these magnets are not just there for an ornamental purposes or to make the sleigh look cool. No, what they will actually do is they are going to push off another magnet, which, well, happens to be inside the earth. And I just told you a few moments ago that when you bring two magnets close to each other and the poles are the same, they will repel each other. So they will push away from each other. And that is what Santa Claus does, because he uses the giant bar magnet that you'll find inside the earth, which, by the way, is an imaginary bar magnet. It's not really there, but it's as if it is there. And as he flies around the world, his sleigh with those magnets on the bottom push off that magnet, other words, repel from that magnet, push away from it, and accelerate the sleigh so that it flies around the planet. There are no fossil fuels burnt, and this is a pretty sustainable way of getting around the world on Christmas Eve. Of course, there are more details to Santa Claus's magnetic solution towards getting around the world in a sustainable way, but I don't have time to go into all the details here. But the main takeaway is this: he is not burning fossil fuels when he's flying around the world. So he does not burn coal or wood or anything like that, because that would be bad for the planet and bad for the atmosphere. Santa Claus is very much thinking sustainably, responsibly on Christmas Eve and throughout the year at the workshops in the Arctic Circle when he's putting the presents together for everyone on Christmas Eve. Santa Claus knows that time is of the essence for our planet, and Santa Claus is setting a great example when it comes to sustainability. And there you have it, some of the key science behind Santa Claus's journey on Christmas Eve. We've taken a look at how Santa Claus is a time traveler, but he should avoid being a time traveler, so then he's not really a time traveler. We've also looked at how NORAD helps to keep track of Santa Claus's journey on Christmas Eve. And, of course, we've looked at the flying sleigh and how Santa Claus is thinking sustainably in relation to his journey on Christmas Eve. If you want to know more about what I do, you can check out my YouTube channel, The Superhero Scientist, where you'll find videos about Santa Claus, Star Wars, superheroes, and lots of other topics. And of course, you can follow me on social media. You'll find me on Instagram, The Superhero Scientist, and also on Facebook, The Superhero Scientist, and on Twitter at Barry W. Science. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this scientific journey through the amazing world and journey for Santa Claus on Christmas Eve. I've been Dr. Barry Fitzgerald as part of Ballinasloe Library's Comic-Con. And until I see you next time, always think super.